Bellum Octavianum Sullanum. The day is a day that will live in infamy. Rome is being torn asunder by Marian and Sullan supporters, and only one side can rule Rome. Today, we find out who is fated the authority of Rome. And now we have arrived at the start of Sulla's civil war. So Lucius Valerius Flaccus is dispatched to Cappadocia to really fight Mithridates, is the technical official reason, but really it's to fight Sulla and, either have him arrested or killed. However, the men under Flaccus, once he arrived there, mutinied and murdered him. The man that led them to do this was Gaius Flavius Fimbria. Fimbria is the actual assassin who murders Flaccus. And this is very important to note. Fimbria, after assassinating Lucius Valerius Flaccus, assumes command of the legions. Flaccus was absolutely a supporter of the Marian faction, as was Gaius Flavius Fimbria. But Fimbria, in an effort to further his own political power, murders his superior to take that position. This has drastic consequences later, as the brother of Lucius Valerius Flaccus, who was called Gaius Valerius Flaccus, was also a strong Marian supporter. But his brother being murdered by Fimbria actually sends him to the other side. He was a powerful political ally that was basically thrown away due to the ambition of Fimbria. I want to briefly cover Flaccus because clearly, from what we know about him, what the sources say, this guy is an experienced general, and he is very well connected in the Cinna faction. So my question is that you kind of have to wonder is, he was sent to fight Mithridates. That was the official reason for his sending, but really this was an effort to deal with Sulla. The question is, what was he actually going to do had he survived long enough to meet with Sulla? It's doubtful Sulla would have peacefully handed over his forces, especially to the smaller force of Flaccus. And it's also doubtful that if they had a military conflict, he'd be able to defeat Sulla. So you kind of wonder what was the point anyway. Nonetheless, Fimbria murders him, assumes command. However, Sulla convinces all of Fimbrian's forces to defect and join Sulla. Fimbria, who's now murdered a man to assume this command and now watched all of his soldiers abandon him, decides there's nothing left for him to do. He ends his life. That is the end of Fimbria. We have a quote from Cicero on Fimbria calling him the most audacious madman of his times, which is really saying something considering the time that this guy was a part of is filled with a litany of madmen. So it's pretty entertaining, or pretty interesting that Cicero would call him the most audacious madman of his times. With Flaccus officially dead and Fimbria also dead, Carbo was elected as consul in their stead. So Gnaeus Papirius Carbo is elected to replace Flaccus. So Cinna and Carbo are greatly afraid of Sulla's return. They know that he has won the war with Mithridates, and even though they signed a treaty at this point that was rather favorable to Mithridates, it still was over and a good victory for Sulla that not only gave his men experience, but much wealth. And with experience and wealth comes loyalty. Obviously, this made them very afraid, and they immediately made every preparation that they possibly could for the defense of Rome from Sulla's return. However, Sulla wrote to the Senate, informing and reminding them of his deeds. Obviously, you have throughout his career as a legate, the capture of Jugurtha, serving under Marius, serving as essentially the main commander in the Social War, and now his conquest in the Mithridatic War. So he's singing his praises of all the good things he's done, which is many. He was very angry that his house had been destroyed, the retaking of Rome by Cinna and Marius. He was very agitated at his allies being killed. Again, his family was forced to flee. So these things aggravated him, and he let the Senate know this. I think it's important to note that Marius and Cinna, when they do re-enter the city, all of the Sullan sources kind of paint them as these madmen who went on these killing sprees. It's highly unlikely that that ever happened. Like I said, we have a list of about 14 people that were political enemies of Marius that were killed. And while they would have probably sided with Sulla, right? Certainly the people that were eliminated, that were politically targeted after that return, were probably in league with Sulla in terms of fundamental beliefs. But these were not people that were necessarily Sullan supporters, right? These were just people who were optimates, who were against Marius. It wasn't even really about Sulla, although certainly they would have agreed with him in general. But like I said, I just think it's important to note that Sulla kind of writes to the Senate pumping up what they've done, all these wrongs that they've done to him. And a lot of it is kind of not necessarily true or greatly over-exaggerated, but I digress. He tells the citizens of Rome, old and new, that he has no ill will towards them. And in fact, he only wants justice against Cinna and Carbo. The soldiers in Italy really now are terribly afraid of Sulla's return. And even though Cinna and Carbo have been spending all this time gathering up resources to fight Sulla, the men, their heart just is not in it. The army approached Cinna, and they begged him, do not do this. Just stand down, and perhaps we can come to a peaceful agreement. Cinna was outraged by this. He couldn't believe that the men would not fight against Sulla, and so he called an assembly. He wanted to rally the men and force them to cross the Adriatic Sea and fight Sulla. He gave a speech to them, no doubt, full of heart and vigor, imploring his men to be virtuous and brave in the face of a mighty foe. However, tensions were already too high, and violence broke out as Cinna was giving his speech. In the chaos, Cinna himself was stabbed and killed by one of his own disgruntled men. And thus Cinna, who did win the Bellum Octavianum, perishes before he even has a chance to fight Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Hearing of this news, Sulla asked the Senate to restore his previous honors, but the Senate, who understood that he was resolved to invade Rome for a second time, gave no answer. Upon the death of Cinna being completely realized within the Senate, many of the senators immediately defected to Sulla's side, and they joined his military camp in order to show him that they did not stand against him in his conquest of Rome. Sulla led 40,000 men on Rome. In his first march, he was met by Quintus Pompeius. In this march, he's met first by Metellus Pius, who had at this point been ending the social war, and for fear of Gaius Marius, he did not return to Rome because, obviously, if you remember, Gaius Marius was a huge political enemy of Metellus Macedonius. So Metellus Pius is the son of Metellus Macedonius. In fear of that political rivalry, he just stays out of Rome. But now, seeing his chance, he joins up with Sulla. Gnaeus Pompeius, the son of Gnaeus Pompeius Strabo from the Social War, joins Sulla, and he grants him 2 more legions. Now, Gnaeus Pompeius, and this is, fellows, we've reached him, Pompey the Great. So this is the Pompey, and this is still a very young man at this time. So Gnaeus Pompeius, who took over the forces of his father, goes to approach Sulla. And as you probably remember from the last video, Gnaeus Pompeius was not a Marian or a Sullan supporter. He kind of was biding his time and holding his own faction. He didn't really like either of those guys. And he does die in essentially camping, ready to defend the city from Marius, but never gets that far because he dies of disease. But Gnaeus Pompeius, the son of Gnaeus Pompeius, so Pompey the Great, or as I will call him, Gnaeus Pompeius, goes to Sulla, and he assures him, he says, I know my father and you didn't get along perfectly, but I assure you, I am on your side. Sulla was a little apprehensive at first, but decided to give the young man a chance, and this turned out to be probably the greatest decision he could have made, as Pompeius proved to be, if not his best, his second best subordinate. So as Sulla's marching on Rome, Metellus Pius joins his cause, Gnaeus Pompeius the Great joins his cause, and he's approached by another man, a man named Publius Cornelius Ceticus. And Sulla really intrigued at this, because Publius Cornelius Ceticus was not just an enemy of Sulla. This man was exiled from Rome, and he fled with Gaius Marius on Sulla's first march to Rome. So Sulla was very intrigued that a supporter so close to Marius that he was literally exiled with him now is appearing before Sulla. For what purpose? Well, Ceticus had looked on all that occurred, and seeing that Marius was dead, and probably in his mind thinking that Sulla was destined and fated to win this war and take command of Rome, he declared his allegiance to Sulla. On the one side, effectively you have Gnaeus Pompeius the Great, Metellus Pius, and Sulla. On the other side, obviously, you have the consuls Carbo and Cinna is now dead. Gaius Norbanus and Lucius Scipio were elected consul. This is Lucius Scipio Asiaticus, who is the great-grandson of Scipio Asiaticus. Anyone just, if you're in the line of Scipios, or Scipios, I'm going to say, because there's just some names where I don't like the like Scipio Africanus, Scipio Asiaticus. Scipio just sounds great. Scipio sounds like peanut butter. I can't do it. Like Sulpicius. Sure, I mean, it sounds tight, but Sulpicius just rolls off my Anglo tongue way better. So, yeah, some names, I'm not a perfect guy here, okay? I'm trying my best, but I digress. So Gaius Norbanus and Lucius Scipio are elected consul, and again, Carbo is still involved and kind of the main figurehead in planning this defense against Sulla and the previously mentioned forces. Norbanus, Carbo, and Scipio had the full support at the start of the Roman people, because they really viewed Sulla as this enemy marching on Rome. I mean, he'd already done this before, and even though he refused the men from looting, he still had many of those, Marian people were all condemned to death if they were caught, and they were forced to flee from Rome, declared enemies of Rome. It was the first time ever that somebody has marched their legions into Rome itself. So obviously, not really understanding his intentions or anything about it, and seeing that he's gearing up to do it again, just view Sulla as an enemy. People of Rome are viewing Sulla as an enemy. They do not view him as this liberator. In the moment of these things happening, Sulla is absolutely viewed as a revolutionary, or if you will, revolting, an enemy of Rome. So the very people, mind you, that he fought against in the social war were rebels, and they revolted from Rome. the people of Rome would have viewed him with the same eye as those others. I just think that's an important thing to mention. So Sulla and Metellus fight Norbanus at Canusium. 6,000 of Norbanus's forces are killed, and only 70 of Sulla's. This is a crushing defeat to the start of this war. Norbanus retreats to Capua, and Lucius Scipio takes his men to fight Sulla. So he takes all of his men, and he gets ready, pitches his camp very close to Sulla. So he's drawing up all these battle plans, him and his son, late into the night. They're planning everything. They have all these ideas, what to do with the men. How can we stop so great a foe as Lucius Cornelius Sulla? Finally, it's late. He decides, let's turn in for the night. And we'll get ready in the morning, brief the men, and prepare for the fight for Rome. He slept soundly that night. An odd calm washed over him in his sleep, and he thought, I'll figure out just what to do. Like the Scipios before me, with the unbeatable odds presented in my family line, a Scipio always ends up on top. He awoke in the morning, ready to give his address to the men. He swung his tent open and looked around, and saw nothing but empty tents, because every single member of his army had deserted to Sulla. So Scipio is quickly swarmed in his camp by Sulla's forces. Only him and his son remained on his side, and he surrenders to Sulla. Sulla implores Scipio, please, your family is held in the highest esteem. Join us. These are tyrants in Rome. These are evil people. You don't want to be with them. Scipio refuses. He could not bear the fact of marching against Rome itself. Sulla agrees to let him go and his son, but he makes him promise not to join up with Carbo again, and Scipio promises that he won't. Now we have to talk about a man named Quintus Sertorius. Quintus Sertorius fought alongside Marius in the Cimbrian War. He fought in the Social War. And he tried to become a tribune, but was blocked by Sulla. He ends up, because of this whole thing, joining with Cinna and Marius in their civil war in the Bellum Octavianum. This is a guy who was involved in the Cimbrian War, the Social War, the Bellum Octavianum. A very experienced general and soldier. Obviously, he did not like Sulla, was incredibly against him, and was a very big supporter of Marius himself. Now, Sertorius sees these failings from Cinna, being murdered by his own men, unable to control him. He sees, what he views as kind of the mistakes that Carbo's making, Norbanus losing, Scipio's entire men deserting him, and he just gets incredibly aggravated and goes off to Hispania. He's technically given command of Hispania, but he essentially sets out there of his own accord, if you will. He goes to Iberia to plan, what his next move is. And I'm sure that Quintus Sertorius will probably never hear about this guy again. I mean, this is probably the last time we're going to hear about Sertorius. I highly, highly, highly doubt that, say, in the next few videos, we'll have a video about Sertorius. I mean, that probably won't happen, right? Probably not. So Papirius Carbo and Gaius Marius the Younger are now elected consul. Marius is only 27 years old when he's elected consul. Now Marius, he's a young man, doesn't have a lot of experience, and he goes to fight Sulla. And though he fights with incredible bravery that would highly, highly live up to the honor of his father, Gaius Marius, he just could not best Sulla, and he was forced to flee. Gaius Marius fought bravely, and he brought much honor to his father, Gaius Marius, in the battle against Sulla. He had done an incredible job against a much more experienced and arguably skilled general in Sulla. However, midway through the battle, many of Marius's soldiers defected to Sulla's side, forcing Marius and his men to retreat. Marius himself only narrowly escaped and was able to flee Sulla's forces. At the same time, Metellus Pius defeats Carbo's lieutenants, and most of the remaining Italian holdouts join Metellus, in fear of military action being taken against them. So Carbo, kind of seeing Metellus' success, quickly goes to besiege Metellus. However, at the same time, he learns of Marius' defeat, and so he retreats out of there. And it's a good thing he did, because Gnaeus Pompeius was shadowing him and constantly chases him down, trying to goad him into a fight. And had he stayed sieging the city, he would have been attacked on two fronts. Now Metellus is free to do whatever he wants, and he goes and wins another victory over Carbo's forces, and even more towns given to Metellus. Marius at this time is being starved out, and seeing that his situation is dire and he has no way to escape this siege, he writes a letter to the Senate. He calls for Publius Antistios, Papirius, Lucius Domitus, and Mucius Scavula, the Pontifex Maximus, to be executed. This letter does get to the Senate, and all of those men are executed. Sulla sends his army to Rome, and he orders them to seize the walls. The people, out of fear of famine, opened the gates for Sulla. He rushed into Rome immediately and confiscated the property of his political enemies. Sulla and Metellus begin to capture city after city after city. Now Carbo is left with his army trying to make a final play to defeat Sulla's forces, and they fight. They start from the early rise of the sun, and they fight long after the sun sets, and that is effectively what ends the battle. No side achieves victory. It just gets too dark for them to continue fighting. In the plain of Spolitium, Pompey and Crassus, both of Sulla's officers, kill 3,000 of Carbo's men, and they besiege one of his best lieutenants, Carinus. Carbo hears about this, and he tries to send some reinforcements to Carinus. But Sulla, always one step ahead, intercepts those forces and kills 2,000 of them. Carinus is able to escape under nightfall. Marius is still besieged, and Marcius Censorinus comes to aid him. Now, Marcius Censorinus is an interesting figure because this is the man who chased, caught, and beheaded Gnaeus Octavius and presented his head to Cinna. Censorinus tries to aid him, however, Gnaeus Pompeius the Great ambushes him and destroys most of his forces. As they were marching back to safety, most of the other left him, leaving very, very, very little soldiers in his command. The only entrance point to the town he was besieged in was through a mountain pass that they could not fit through, and Sulla controlled. So Marius, understanding this, attempts to fight his way out, and though he fought immensely valiantly and tried to escape from Sulla's siege, he was unable. Carbo and Norbanus attempt to attack Metellus. Now, Metellus was encamped by a vineyard, and Carbo and Norbanus decide, if we wait just before nightfall, the men will go to sleep. We can rush in and kill them. And that's just what they did. They waited till it got to nightfall, crept through the vineyard, but unfortunately, the plan went horribly wrong. Metellus' forces were alerted to their presence, and the men trying to sneak through this vineyard were caught and trapped in the vines. 10,000 of Carbo's forces were killed, with 6,000 after watching the slaughter of the men trapped and cut down in the vines, deserted. Albinovanus, who was a Lucanian, joined Metellus. But shortly after he joined Metellus, he came back to Norbanus. There he assembled most of Norbanus and Carbo's lieutenants in one place for a big feast that we must celebrate. We will have victory over this sullen regime. We will stop them. Let us have a toast to our assured victory. And as the men got all drunk and had their fun, Albinovanus slaughtered them all. He did this as a way to show Metellus that he truly was on his side and was worth having as an ally. So the news of Albinovanus' treachery reaches Norbanus, and he kind of sees, hey, this war might be over, and he decides to flee to Rhodes. Sulla later on sends messages to the people of Rhodes, and he kind of demands that they surrender Norbanus over to him. And the people of Rhodes are kind of deciding on what they want to do, and while they are deciding that, Norbanus saves them all the trouble, and right in the middle of the market square, just goes, this whole life thing, it's not working out. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to turn it down. I'm just turning it down. I don't want this life thing anymore. So that happens. He's officially out of the picture. And Carbo, seeing that basically all of his forces are being destroyed and all of his best generals and lieutenants are dying, flees to Africa. There he thinks, I can kind of regroup and make another attempt. While he does this, Gnaeus Pompeius fights and defeats 20,000 of Carbo's loyal soldiers. Carinus, Marcius, and Damasippus went with all the forces they had, and they tried to force their way through the mountain pass that Sulla protected. They even got aid from the Samnites. After a very, very brief attempt and realizing it was impossible to get through this mountain pass, they marched on Rome itself. Sulla camped his men by the Colline Gate, or Porta Collina, but so Sulla camps by the Collina Gate, Colline Gate, however you'd like to say it, it's okay with me. The battle for Rome itself was fated to happen this very day. All of the Roman Republican history was building up to this moment, this deep factionism that had sparked in Rome between the populares and optimates manifested itself in the battle for Rome. On the right flank, Sulla commanded, and he dominated his opponents, giving no reprieve to any force that stood in his way. However, his left flank was totally demolished. The guards on the wall were so scared that they dropped the portcullis, crushing many underneath it. The fighting continued for quite a while until Marcius, Carinus, and Lamponius fled. 50,000 men perished in the battle for Rome. After the battle was over, Sulla had 8,000 prisoners killed. 8,000. Marcius and Carinus were captured, and Sulla had them both beheaded. Marius, now understanding that with Carbo effectively fleeing to Africa, the massive battle for Rome being lost, there was nothing now to be done, and Gaius Marius the Younger, the son of one of Rome's most illustrious generals, took his own life. The young man, 27 years of age, was caught, found in his hiding place. His head was separated from his body, and Sulla had it displayed in the rostra in the forum. Sulla mocked the youth. He would say, "You must first learn to row before you try to steer." I think this is, without a doubt, one of the most cruel portrayals we have of Sulla. If the mocking and to Gaius Marius the Younger is real, I think it paints a very, very damnable picture of Sulla. You can say, oh, Gaius Marius the Younger really did try and take power and try and stop Sulla from marching on Rome. What did you want him to do? I mean, this is the son of Gaius Marius, who's casted this great shadow of and now not only just, has done so many great deeds for Rome, retook Rome in his old age. His son, seeing this, is trying to live up to what his father would want, and essentially joins an impossible mission without, and for that, he's mocked by Sulla. I mean, beheaded, displayed in the forum, and mocked. I think it just, you already won, bro. You don't got, you know what I'm saying? You already won. You don't have to do this to a guy. What did you possibly think Gaius Marius' son was going to do? You know what, dude? Yeah, actually, I'm totally on your side. Oh, the guy who's, been slandering my father for his entire life. Yeah, I guess I'll join you. You know what I mean? It's crazy. Praenest falls to Sulla, and he kills all of the senators who aided Marius in Praenest. He takes the inhabitants of the city and divides them into 3 sections: Romans, Samnites, and Praenestians. He tells the Romans they all deserve death, but in his mercy he will pardon them. However, immediately after that, he mercilessly shoots down the other 2 groups, only sparing the women and young children. So now they've watched Sulla gain control of Rome, walk onto Praenest, kill all of the senators who aided Marius. Anyone who wasn't Roman was killed. So now not only has he killed 8,000 prisoners that he captured in the Roman battle, he's now gone to Praenest, killed senators, and anyone who wasn't Roman was murdered. Norba is to be taken next, but the people, kind of understanding that they had no chance, killed each other and burned their city down, hoping that none of it would be plundered for Sulla. And this is it. Sulla has officially conquered Italy through murder, war, and, in general, violence. Sulla has become master of Rome and Italy itself. Sulla was not done there, though. He made sure to install loyal generals and garrisons in any towns that he suspected even a semblance of revolt or discontent. And with this, he now dispatched Gnaeus Pompeius the Great to finally capture Carbo in Africa. While Pompeius is sent to Africa, Sulla addresses the Roman people in the assembly. He talks of all his exploits: the Jagarthan War, the Cimbrian War where he fought alongside Catulus. He talks of his victory over Mithridates. He talks of his victory in the social war. And most importantly, he talks of his current victory. But he constantly makes menacing statements because he wants to inspire terror in the people. He finished his statements by saying he would bring change which would be beneficial to the people so long as they obeyed him. But of his enemies he would spare none, and they would be punished with the utmost severity. So now we get to the point where we talk about dreaded proscriptions of Sulla. Sulla made a list of 1,600, but we're going to call it 2,000 people that must be punished. Many of these people had their belongings confiscated, but most, make no mistake about it, were killed. Prizes were given freely to assassins, and anyone who concealed those prescribed were also put to death or punished severely. Many were killed right where they were caught, but some were brought right before Sulla, dropped at his feet, and then their punishment was carried out, whether it be murder, maiming, banishment, or just having your property taken. This is an incredibly tumultuous time. Hospitality, private friendship, the borrowing or lending of money were all accounted as crimes if done to the proscribed individuals. Now and then, someone would be arrested for doing a kindness to just a suspect of someone being, aiding proscriptions, and they themselves would be arrested. they would maybe just have had an acquaintance with this person, they would be punished. The accusations abounded mostly against the rich, and when charges against individuals failed, Sulla took vengeance on entire communities. He punished them by demolishing their citadels, destroying their walls, or imposing fines. Most of the colonies, he would put his troops, to have a garrison there. It was just an absolute military takeover and a absolute mess for anyone who had anything that somebody else wanted. They could just say, hey, yeah, this guy's aiding people who were proscripted. And there's really nothing you can do. This is, again, so we talk about the evil of Sulla and the wrong things he's done. Like, if we're talking about I think the mocking of Gaius Marius the Younger, I think is incredibly evil. And it's all, I want to talk about this briefly because it's like, so you failed to beat Marius, effectively. He fled, he escaped, he retakes Rome. And unfortunately for you, Marius dies before you can have your grand conflict with Marius, which is like, what a world, right? I mean, it's crazy that the two people who had these, like a lifetime of political aspirations against one another never got to face off against each other. I think it's a very sad thing that we didn't get to see that. But then you fight his son, who is really going to be no threat for you. You defeat them easily, and then after his son takes his own life, you behead him and have him displayed in the forum, and you constantly mock him. Not a good look. Then Marius, we know that they killed about 14 people. Again, who weren't even necessarily Sullan supporters. I mean, and when I say not necessarily, they would have been allied in Sulla in like-mindedness, but they were not like, this was not like they were Sullan and they were pushing Sulla. This was just that they were a part of that faction and had the same values. But as where the Sullan proscriptions are specifically targeting political opponents, people, anyone, even tangentially related, even somewhat related to the Marius faction. So they're immensely punished. 2,000 people. So you had 14 people eliminated, and you have now put 2,000 people on a list. We, like the definite sources, they say that we have like 500 names were put on the list, or like there was like 1,600 names and we have 500. Out of the 500 names were definitely listed, we have like 30 of them. And then, we know of a potential for 1,000 more. Whatever the case may be, and you can argue with me if you want in the comments, but Sulla's proscriptions were far, far worse for Rome than anything that happened during Maria and Cinna's control. Most of the people that were put on the proscription list, would have just been anybody. And I'm going to get into that in a second, but I want to get through the prescriptions in general. So bad enough that you're having political opponents put to death immediately. So if people like you are supposed to be loyal to you, they see them, they're supposed to kill them immediately. Some of them bring them to you, or and then what is the choice of punishment, right? So you could punish them by banishing them, you could punish them by fines. There's a million ways you could deal with them. Murder was your most used method. And assassins were, as a matter of fact, given rewards. So you're not just, right, we're not talking about arresting people and giving them a trial. We're talking about literally paying assassins after the fact of them murdering people. Insanity. Absolutely evil, insane, malicious actions. Confiscation of property. So anyone who's rich, anyone who is going to be a rich member of the Marian faction, you can just kiss every single asset you have goodbye because it's getting taken, and you'll be lucky if you don't die also on top of everything you've owned taken from you. On top of this, any Marian faction members, right? All of your children are stripped of their rights and are no longer citizens. So now, just because you've been proscripted, everyone in your family suffers also. It's madness. It's absolute madness. But the way that it was carried out was absolutely malicious, evil, and unjust. And this goes to be shown, like I say, even people that were just not even really helping, maybe they were suspected of helping these people, were put to death or punished. So there's 3 people I want to talk about specifically during the proscriptions, give you a better idea of them. The first one is Scipio Asiaticus, Lucius Scipio, the same man who was consul and tried to fight Metellus and tried to fight Sulla. All of his forces defected, and he was told he'd be spared as long as he didn't go back to Carbo. He does go back to Carbo and tries to help him, and he's caught again. And then he flees again during the proscriptions. And even though Sulla knew where he was, and even though Scipio was 4th on his list of proscriptions, so he's right up at the top of people who should be killed, he lets him live out the rest of his days in exile. Then we have another proscription person written down by Sulla, Julius Caesar. I mean Gaius Julius Caesar, or Gaius Julius Caesar is who I am talking about, the real Julius Caesar. He is on the proscription list, and all of Caesar's relatives and family plead with Sulla, do not kill Julius Caesar. I mean, this is a great man, and Julius was a very outspoken young man, and we're going to get into the life of Julius Caesar, and I got a lot to say about the specific things relating to him, but just in general, know that he was put on the proscription list, and he was to be killed. Many, many people came to rally behind and support and protect the young Caesar. Sulla responded to the people, in this one Caesar, there are many Mariuses. And so he said that, to display his apprehension in letting Julius live, because he felt as though Julius Caesar could be even more troublesome than Gaius Marius. And he was right. The last person I want to talk about in the proscriptions is Quintus Aurelius, who was just a very, very rich man, normal citizen of Rome, was not allied in any way with Marius, was probably not even a populare, might have not even been an optimati. He was just a very normal, middle-of-the-road citizen, quiet, not in no way a troublemaker, a bad person, didn't aid either side, just a normal Roman. And he's going down to the forum one day, just enjoying my day. Gonna have a beautiful day in Rome. The sun is shining. God, I love being a Roman citizen that doesn't engage in all the factionism of the age. Ah, beautiful. And then he would have squinted a little bit. Probably would have rubbed his eyes a couple times, like he was in a cartoon and waking up out of bed. He probably rubbed his eyes a bunch as he's looking at this list, staring at him, because he sees right on the wall his own name. He's like, why is my name on the... Oh, what did I must have done something good, got my name up on the wall. And then he looks up and he sees that his name is on the proscription list written by Sulla. And he goes, would you look at that? I might be in trouble. And so it's said that he jokes and laments that only due to the estate that he owned in Alba was the only reason he would be prosecuted and condemned, because he had not sided with anyone. He was never involved in the factionism at all. So this was just a way to strip him of his property. And that would have been nice if it was just that, because no, they immediately seize him and kill him. So not only do they take his lands, they kill him right there. So I think this is really what I want to talk about. So Sulla's proscriptions, did they have good intent behind them, if according to Sulla, and that faction? Sure. You look at the treatment of Scipio, he's just left in exile. He's not pursued. Julius Caesar is let live. But then look at somebody like Quintus Aurelius. Even though he's put on the proscription list, right? And even though Sulla wrote these lists, and this is where I point out you have to blame Sulla and put a lot of this on Sulla. Sulla might have very well spared many of these enemies, like Scipio, Caesar. But when it came to the people that he really had disdain for, truly, he made sure they died. Made sure of it. So Scipio, because of the respect for the family of Scipios, that's why he was let live. Julius Caesar, out of respect for the Julia family, he was let live. That is it. It's not like it was out of the kindness of his heart. It was because he had deep admiration and respect for these families. When it comes to people like Quintus Aurelius, there was no care given. It was, yeah, we need that property. It's going to help. It's going to help out. That was it. It was not a political enemy. It was a malicious thing. And you can argue, if you really want to argue, you can say, like, oh, even though we have it documented that Sulla wrote the list himself, you can say whatever. He was, you know, influenced by other people and given names from other people, whatever you want to say. Whatever you want to say to diminish the culpability of Sulla writing the names on the list, you can. Sure, I'll give that to you. What you can't take away is that those names were put on the list and their lives were, in some cases, ended, in many cases, destroyed irreparably, property taken, exiled, whatever, because of those proscriptions that were absolutely unjust and caused far more trauma and turmoil in Rome than anything that Marius had ever done. So, yeah, the proscriptions are one of, in my mind, for my view, one of the worst things that were done in this era. And there's a lot of people who view them differently. A lot of people view this as like this kind of saving of Rome, and they really did believe that they targeted the quote-unquote evil and popularity faction of corruption. You can believe that if you want to, and certainly the corrupt officials were, dealt with, but let's not pretend like there wasn't corruption on both sides. And let's not, so it's like, this should be looked at. It's very hard. I'll save all my stammering and rambling for later. Let's finish what happens here. So, Pompeius is sent to Africa to deal with Carbo, and eventually he captures him. He orders everyone who fled with Carbo to be killed except for Carbo himself. So you think, wow, Gnaeus Pompeius the Great, he's going to let Carbo live. That's pretty cool. No, he chains him up, has him crawl in front of him in a massive public spectacle, and then cuts his head off. So, and I just want to mention quickly, so this is all takes place in Sicily. Pompey catches Carbo in Sicily and everything. So everything that transpires, the killing of the others who fled with him and himself, the beheading of him, the display, is all in Sicily. But yeah, so he catches him, has him beheaded, and has his Carbo's head sent to Sulla. But the main guy left is Quintus Sertorius, and we will definitely be doing a video. I know I said earlier, I tricked you guys. I know I said we're never going to hear about this Quintus Sertorius guy again, but I lied. We're going to hear about him a lot. But Quintus Sertorius, who is in Spain, is still hostile to the Sullan regime. And so Sulla decides at this point to send Metellus Bias to deal with him. So Cornelius Sulla has all previous actions. Cornelius Sulla has all of his previous actions restored, and he erects a statue of himself that is inscribed Cornelius Sulla, the ever fortunate, which is probably the most apt description of the guy. No elections could pass because Sulla was now tyrant, and he used the custom of interrex, which is the interim king, essentially. This wasn't used for hundreds and hundreds of years, but he uses it, has one of his supporters put into the position of interrex, and then they declare him, Sulla, dictator for life. Officially dictator for life, and has complete command over Rome. Now, to keep up appearances, he still allowed consular elections, but it didn't matter. He held absolute power. He could veto anything the consuls decided. During this time, he enacted many laws and reduced the power of the tribunes immensely, so much that they were essentially inconsequential rules. He forbade anyone who ever took the office of tribune from running for another, which effectively shunned the position from any reputable member of society because it would completely tank their political career. And just to make rising harder for the plebeian class, or anyone in general, he made sure that within rising the ranks in Rome of political office, there was a clear structure. You had to climb each individual rank to achieve the next one, meaning that nobody could go from a lowly legate to a tribune, to a praetor, to all the way up to a consul. No one could rise like Gaius Marius had. Well, what an interesting little thing he did. And not just Gaius Marius, many others, but Marius was among the first. At this point, he adds 300 knights to the Senate, and this is kind of the masterstroke right here of Sulla. He frees 10,000 slaves of the proscripted men. So out of people that he banished, killed, whatever, property was taken, 10,000 of those slaves he frees, and he calls them the Cornelii. This was a political masterstroke because it ensured, now with 300 knights being moved to the Senate, he has knight class with him. And then, with obviously already having most of the Senate classes, the optimates were mostly the higher class individuals, or mostly members of the Senate. He had their support, and now influxing 10,000 freed slaves who would absolutely be loyal to Sulla. I mean, it was a masterstroke. Now he's got people in every single class supporting him. So like I said, Sulla is now kind of dictating all of these laws, completely curtails the power of the tribunes, doing everything that he thinks is right. But in this time, a man named Quintus Lucretius Ofella, who served under Sulla and played a very integral role during his civil war, fought very bravely in the social war, was a very good officer. He decides to run for consul, off the weight of his war record. But Ofella had not held the previous offices that Sulla deemed a requirement. So Sulla gathers him in the forum and murders him, slays him in front of all the people in Rome. He then cites the disobedience and his unwillingness to follow the laws that Sulla had dictated for why he had been killed. This causes a massive fear of Sulla among the people. He tells the people a parable. It says there's a farmer who, being bitten by lice, and so he takes his shirt and he washes the shirt out. And he puts the shirt back on and he goes back to plowing. But shortly after, the lice keep biting him again. So he takes off the shirt again and he washes the shirt. He's aggravated this time. Puts the shirt back on, goes back to plowing. For a while later, the lice start biting him again. So what does the farmer do? He burns the shirt. Sulla is telling the people in no uncertain terms, if you keep acting up, I will have no problem burning you. And not just you, but I will burn this city to the ground. And he meant it. The killing of Ofella is proof of that. So now Sulla is living out his dictatorship, presiding over everything, doing everything he can. A few years pass. Sulla decides to assemble the masses in the forum to speak to them. There he voluntarily lays down his power of dictator for life. He had no fear for retaliation. He had no fear for the proscription. He had no fear for the war that he had caused upon Rome. And this is because he now, with ultimate power, had given it back to the people. A man who had everything, could have done anything. A man who had been declared dictator for life, ultimate power, voluntarily laid it down. There's a funny little story of this, that as Sulla walked home after laying down power, a little boy followed him, and he kept cursing at him and yelling at him, calling him every name that he could think of. And the boy demanded to know how he could possibly turn down power. Sulla just laughed and said as he closed the door to his home, "This boy will ensure that nobody gives up power over Rome again." Shortly after this, Sulla moves into his retired life, even though he's still slightly young. He moves out into the countryside where he spends most of his days a peaceful private citizen, hunting, fishing, and loving every day. And with that, Sulla's civil war is officially over. This is obviously a victory for Sulla. I think this is an incredible thing to unpack, and I think I'm now, just for the future, I know I did this in the last one, and this is how I'm going to do them moving forward. I'm probably going to do these videos on what happened, and then the tier list videos separate, because in the tier list videos, I really want to get into the motivations and the morality. And I can't help it. Every now and then I'm going to throw in stuff like I, very, very briefly mentioned how I didn't like the treatment and the mocking of Gaius Marius the Younger, and how I found the proscriptions to be very bad. I'm still going to talk about those things in detail in the tier list video. But in general, I want these videos to just kind of be an analysis of events, and I want the tier list to be more about the morality of those actions. But yeah, that is pretty much that. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys learned about Sulla's civil war, and we will, in the next video, really be breaking down the morality of Sulla and all those involved in the civil war. Thank you guys so much. Have a beautiful day.